My name is Kali, K-A-L-I, as in the Hindu goddess of life and death. I chose the name myself about 7 years ago. I was born in 1937. The Second World War and I began at the same time. While I don't remember its beginning, of course, I do remember the later years of the war, the practice air raids, the ration books, the red and green plastic mills. I remember standing in my darkened room once at night during an air raid and thinking, boys and girls my age are dying in gas chambers in Europe because, like me, they're Jewish. My parents came from Europe. That could be me. My mom and dad used to listen to Walter Winchell every night on the 6 o'clock news. Nobody could say a word when he was on. And I was always being reminded that some starving child in Europe would be happy to have the Brussels sprouts I refused to eat. A few years after the war began, my father became ill and continued to get worse in spite of all the medicines and nursing homes and male nurses that came and went. Life in the house seemed to revolve around his illness. There are lots of good memories, too. Kids have this marvelous ability to forget their troubles and live life. I climbed trees and made telephone switchboards out of old shoeboxes. I played a lot of house and a sexy game of doctor with Will, the mechanic's son, from across the alley. I played wedding with Irene, the little Greek girl who lived above the grocery store. We'd take turns being the bride and groom. Her mother still had her bridal veil and she'd let us play with it. If it hadn't been for the veil, I'd much rather have been the groom, because he got to make all the decisions. And when the three of us got together, we'd spend hours in the small park across from my house, playing our favorite game, war. The grand victories and the crushing defeats. The good guys and the bad guys. The good guys won most of the time because that's the way it happened in the movies. But being the bad guy was more fun. They didn't have to play by the rules. Even as a teenager, I remember secretly wishing I could be in the middle of a war. Things felt more real and intense. That was a long time ago. Since then, I've witnessed many wars, but they weren't any fun. There were the Korean and Vietnam Wars. Watts burned down. Riots destroyed whole sections of Harlem. The southeast Bronx began to look like a war zone after a bombing. Malcolm X, George Jackson, and Martin Luther King were murdered. John and Bobby Kennedy were assassinated. Violet Liuzzo and other civil rights workers were killed in the South. Lumumba and Mahatma Gandhi were assassinated, not to mention the endless numbers of faceless women and men. Stalin's policemen murdered 3 million farmers in the name of progress. The first atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, initiating the nuclear age. Young, America-loving soldiers were used as guinea pigs by their government to test the effects of atomic explosions. And the senseless killing goes on in Central America, South Africa. Hundreds of thousands of Biafrans and then Ethiopians starved and are still starving to death, while hundreds of thousands of pounds of grains and vegetables lay moldering in government warehouses, and huge sums of money raised for the starving are diverted to the coffers of the politically powerful. Mental institutions are filled with women who turn their frustrations and pent-up rage inward. Jails are filled with men who can't find a self-respecting place for themselves in the world. Our food and our air are poisoned. Even our medicines are deadly. And if the arms race continues, we're threatened with the possibility of a nuclear holocaust that will make the Nazi extermination look like a perverse children's game. I don't understand it. How can human beings do this to one another? How does one live in this world gone mad without going crazy oneself, or pretending it isn't happening, which is its own form of madness? Not that I didn't want to do more, and I've always known what I wanted to do. It's always been about making connections of one kind or another. There would be long periods between working on plays, and then, more often than not, I couldn't get what I wanted to do off the ground. Sometimes the endings were complicated or messy. Sometimes they just petered out. And here I am approaching middle age, with lots of skills but no satisfying way to make a living, and no money in the bank. So I decided it's time to give up my dreams and grow up, train myself to do something useful and satisfying. But wouldn't you know it, no sooner had I finalized the decision in my mind than an irresistible urge came over me to do another theater piece. One last try. I'm scared. Am I a fool? Will I make it this time?